to the podcast. My name is Wim Kerkhoff, founder of Top Left and a couple of other MSPs. And I have James Davis again with me from C-Level Operations, PAX 8 in APAC, and continuing our series on project management. So welcome back, James.
Well, thanks for having me, Wim. It's been lots of fun, and I look forward to this session today. Let's dive in.
So my pleasure. And something we haven't really talked on yet is roles in a project team. So my teams are mostly smaller. Like we do have project management going on, of course, but you've worked with a lot of MSPs and in MSPs, I guess. And what works, what doesn't for roles? I guess it maybe depends on the size of the MSP, but who's the best project manager? What do you look for?
That's a great start of a question. Who's the great project manager? My answer always is it depends on your organization. And it's that, like you said, there's different size organizations, there's different maturity levels as well. So I think we can go through that journey from really small to what it looks like as we're starting to get a lot larger. So when we first start, mentioned this before in previous episodes, we often dump our most experienced tech in the project manager. And we've both made comments around it very rarely works well. It's a lot of the times to start out with, it's good enough. It's better than the owner running with all the projects and managing it. So we've already improved. But there's a limit to where we're going to go if they're not actually wanting to do the project management component, because they're a tech at heart a lot of the time. They want to do the technical part. They want to execute. And to be a good project manager, project coordinator, we'll talk about the roles as we go through, they're not looking at the overall delivery, the scheduling, the profitability, all of those kinds of components. They're really just getting in and getting it done. That is good enough a lot of the time to start out with. If you're like a 5-person MSP, just to hand it off from the owner, when things aren't that structured, and throwing in that tech that's capable of problem solving and just getting the job done so the client's happy, that's a win. But what happens is when you start getting more sales and the projects are coming in more consistently, that stops working because you start piling up multiple projects on the go. That effectiveness of that type of person without the structured way of thinking, and often not having any type of methodology in their head, they're just trying to muscle and feel their way through. As soon as you have 3 or 4 projects on the go, you're going to miss things. You're going to let things start slipping. It gets too hard. Often these sort of engineers aren't necessarily that great with clients like we think they are. But when we start seeing like people that are really good with clients, there's that big difference. So when it starts getting awkward and we get behind, we get in that spiral again. We're basically back to where we were when the owner was doing it and we were getting too busy to execute it properly. So that's when we got to start looking at that next step. And often where I see a lot of less mature MSPs, their immediate reaction is, I need to go find a really highly experienced tech and call them a project manager. I'll go hire an even more experienced person than what I've got now. And they just don't exist for that size of MSP. There's lots of very highly experienced, very highly capable technical project managers that work in like big corporates and stuff. They don't translate down into this smaller space because there's a lot more bureaucracy, there's a lot more maturity, and often we don't need that level in the types of projects we're doing. So we're either going to get someone that has done projects in that big corporate space and wants to be a project manager, and that we're sort of giving them that opportunity to take that role and run with it. But most often those kinds of people aren't capable of creating the structure because they've already worked in a fully mature environment. So you're throwing them into a chaotic environment and expecting them to solve all those problems.
Firstly, you're explaining exactly what I did 10 years ago. I hired this, I'm like, PM's a mess, projects are a mess. Hired this guy who kind of came my way, really nice guy, like 40 years of project management experience, big projects, multi-million-dollar things. And he's coming into our little MSP and didn't get ahead, right? He wanted to help the underdog and didn't pay him a whole lot. He was worth like triple probably. So got him for a steal. And but really we weren't more. After a year of him managing projects, we still had messy projects and failures and unhappy clients, even with all of that. So he couldn't create the process and shift the culture and build up the team. So kind of like a bull, not maybe not a bulldog, but it's really not equipped. Even though he was good with people, there was something missing in that formula. So
And
you've
what
kind
do
of
you
nailed
reckon
it.
was missing?
I think he ended up kind of too much telling people what to do and how he's done it and how he's done bragging about what he's done in the past and not really listening and say, what is the most effective? What's the smallest thing that could work here so we can make this flow better? What has to be solved? To end up being abrasive, blaming me for a lot of things. This is the way he interacted with me, the clients, the techs wasn't worked out. So I don't know.
But
It's a
very
bit.
much.
Did he have the sales side or the entrepreneurial side? So, and I also felt he's been missed some of the details, and yeah, we're just kind of rushing it because it's okay. Let's put this together and send it out, and not getting the feedback or the buy-in from the team or me. So kind of he's almost like running with stuff without me, and that was an issue in a small company.
A lot of the lack of context. It's like they know the world they're in, very capable in that, and they're in a new world, and they think it automatically translates. It's human nature, right? Like it's what your story is exactly what I hear all the time. I think we've all tried that at some point or are about to try that, and it almost always fails because of these sort of reasons. The most successful change that I see all the time is actually when people hire in a project coordinator and someone who's non-technical, because what happens is they don't know the technical details. They're not worried about it, so they come from in a lot different experience level and a lot different perspective. And most often they're a cheaper resource. Like you got lucky that they came to work for cheaper, but most often people are paying overs for that type of experience because they think it's going to solve their problems. But ends up exactly what you said. Like a year later, we're no better off, and in some ways, we're actually worse off because now we've got a cranky project team that were okay and happy before and had a good culture. They just weren't structured and weren't as productive as they could be. But now we've got people that are good employees that we want to keep, and we've got have this toxic element which often isn't toxic maliciously and on purpose. It's just not a right fit for the company maturity and culture. It's a different world. So what I've seen is people coming in as a project coordinator, more reasonably priced, not technical, and being able to buddy up with that sort of senior technician that was then able to have someone that's focused on the clients, the organization, coordination of everything, and they're very good at it. That frees up that really good technical person to go back to what they're good at and happy, and we getting productive work out of the projects. But then we're also building that structure so it's going to become repeatable as well. And those sort of project coordinator resources are actually pretty easy to find because there's so many equivalent industries that are used to high stress, organized planning. Even if they don't know project methodology, people that have come from like event planning, high stress, there's certain things that need to happen at certain times. They're used to coordinating different people. They come in quite well. People from the building industry, it's the same, like working with multiple different trades, timelines, roadblocks that come up because of weather and things like that. But again, slot into this equivalency as long as we give them some support and understanding of what's going on. That really unlocks a lot of potential because we don't often need really rigorous high level project management methodology. We've spoken through the series around like a lot of the time projects are fairly small. They're either going to be repeatable that we should be able to make cookie cutter, or they're going to be a bit more agile and you put some simple things around fortnightly scrums or something and interactions with clients and manage it that way. So we don't need as much maturity as we really think in that sort of early stages to progress on. And there's a big difference in the terminology there. Like we call people in our industry project managers. There's very few people that I've seen that are doing project management in MSPs that are qualified project managers. They haven't even done a project management video on YouTube to know what different methodology is. So calling them a project manager is a bit disingenuous as well, I feel. And so with the project management bodies that actually have membership of qualified people, fair enough, because it's a proper profession that You do a lot of years of training to get qualified as a proper project manager. And that's where we fail as well when we go and advertise the jobs, because you start advertising project manager, the amount of people I've had in the past that apply for that, and they're just not right because they're project managers. They're like those big corporate people that come to the jobs. So when we break it down a bit, project coordinators often end up being lot more realistic to what the majority of MSPs need to a much larger size and much larger size of projects and complexities. Because at the end of the day, all we're doing is coordination of what's going on. We're coordinating the internal resources to do the work. We're coordinating the schedules. We're coordinating with external parties like the clients, the third-party vendors, anyone else. All they're doing is making sure the stuff gets done. It's very rare that we're needing to do the full-on real project planning and real project management at that level. So that sort of terminology makes a huge difference. And I've seen a lot of businesses get stuck from this, where they've put their senior tech in as the project manager now, and when they want to bring somebody else in, like how do we distinguish a proper project manager above them? How do we set out who's the manager of the department? Because we basically put them up the top straight away. So all of a sudden they're a bit more ego driven, which a lot of the sort of senior engineers that want to be that project people in the first place are a bit more driven. We back ourselves into a corner when we do it, where a lot of the time those guys are what I'd call the lead project tech or lead project engineer, because that's what they are. They're just the leader, technical leader of delivering the projects. And it sounds like a lot of semantics, but it's actually quite important to create this clarity to understand the expectations of what goes into them and then what resources we need as we grow. And like I said, so we're not backing ourselves into a corner of, well, the tech's called a project manager, so I can't call anyone else that. So I have to make a higher level title name to make them above this person. Like, it gets a bit ridiculous, I find, in MSPs.
Oh, titles are fascinating. Yeah, manager, director, VP, all those things. Yeah, we've gone through a few of those. Yeah, realigning them.
What's probably the next iteration? So we've got a lead project engineer, we've got a project coordinator at that point. A lot of the times, MSPs can get away with just having those two resources till, depending on that specific volume in projects, but the average MSP, they can get away with that sort of little team till probably 4 or 5 million revenue.
Oh, easy. I believe you can easily do that. And then with nowadays, a lot of MSPs are doing the pod concept. So then you just duplicate that structure.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And each pod has its own salesperson or account manager to support them on that side. And you may not need somebody with a high level of like a real project manager based on what you shared there. Yeah, I hadn't looked at that way. That you can give them the PM title, but really they're project coordinator. They're supporting the team. So they're subordinate to really the senior tech and whoever's leading that team.
Yeah, it works really well. Like especially if you get the right personalities together, they flourish and grow together, because you've got the technical person with the non-technical person. If you've got that good technical person that can share and support with the non-technical person with that technical detail and build the trust, and they trust them with the non-technical coordination, they can smash it, because they've got that inbuilt trust, and the strengths from each person complement the weaknesses of the others. And like you said, like that sort of team, you can duplicate that. You can often what happens a lot of the time too is you just have that one lead tech, and then you put some like level 2s or even some level 1s under that lead tech in that pod, because then you've got more cost effective resources delivering the repeatable things that should be created as processes. So we don't need a lot of senior project people there all the time. And that's like that sort of team. Like I know companies that are like 12, 15 million, they've only got like 5 people in projects. Our coordinator, the senior guy, and a couple of those level 2s. How profitable is that? Obviously, it depends on project volume, how many projects we're doing, and how much revenue generating from that. But if you've got that good team that's focused on repeatability and automation, that can scale really, really easily without needing as many people as what we typically think, and not needing as many much higher level resources. And it's only really when you're doing plus, I'd say plus 100 mil, plus $1 million projects that you probably need to start looking at that higher level actual project manager. The typical projects that we do in MSPs don't really need it. We don't need to have like the full on project budgeting, project planning, outlining all the stakeholders properly. Like, it's all good practice, but like actually writing like a 50-page project plan and then managing it to it, it's not really needed at our level. And we don't charge enough for it to be cost effective either. That's usually my advice to most businesses. Like and that's the majority of MSPs. Like, when you start getting over like that 15 million, 20 million, you're basically just duplicating that pod structure that you've got until you get a certain size, and you do it differently. But the majority of people listening to this at that size are what probably won't ever get to that size.
Yeah, like just on that point, like a few years ago, we had a project manager and lots of experience as well, been around for 40 years and technical and project management. And based on our project volume of whatever $1 million, yeah, no problem, I can help you. Once he actually got into it, he's like, where's the project? Because they were all like just like 50-hour project, 100-hour projects that we do over 6 months, because that's just the nature of what we do and service work. So he kind of struggled. And really, because the team can self-manage it, they really just need the coordination and admin support, be able to say, hey, what's important and what's going on, and just help with scheduling and a bit of follow-up with clients. Yeah, that's coordination, not managing a 5,000-hour project. It's a very different thing. That's a good point.
I have a lot of respect for the people that can do those sort of projects that span multiple years, and the amount of hours that go into them and the different stakeholders. Like, that's a real special talent. That's real professional, that's been educated in that compared to.
I know some of those because my brother has a construction company. They're doing $100 million projects, so they've got some serious PM talent there, right? They've had a headhunt and build their PM team. Like, they've got, I don't know how many dozens of project managers now, but they're real project managers. Yeah.
It's just a different thing. And I think one of the things I'd mention is we're scaling up too. So we usually, when you are going, generally make that jump to a project coordinator. If you've got 5 or 6 projects going per month, you can probably justify it right then, because you've got that one project engineer, and then you can afford that project coordinator, because that's where the usual tipping point is. Because all of a sudden, once that engineer has more than 3 or 4 projects on the go, they're not going to be able to deliver and coordinate at the same time. Often the jump to being able to start getting other techs dedicated to that area, a lot of MSPs struggle with that because they don't have the consistency of sales to really warrant to go, oh, well, I'll put another full-time person in. They might be able to dedicate half, like a half-time resource, and they're like on the fence of what I need to do. So often I recommend that's where you start looking at creating it into a professional services team. So it's not just the projects that go to like our ConnectWise projects over 8 hours type of thing that need a lot more coordination. Is to be able to fund the resources to have dedicated people, is actually take out all the desktop, the routine deployment type stuff like desktops and switches and that kind of stuff that don't need projects, don't need project management. But still, there's that same sort of mentality of, we've got something to deliver and change. We've got a sort of a methodology to manage through that, and then we can make more volume for the project coordinator to manage, because at that size, it's very easy to manage all the volume that you'll get from those types of sales with that person. And then you can dedicate a level 1, level 2 alongside your lead engineer in projects, and it's paying for them. So when there's those sort of downtimes normally for projects, there'll be desktops to install, there'll be might be some simple office moves, there might be these other things that aren't normally projects, and all of a sudden you've got that revenue to fund it, and it splits it out from service desks. So those things start getting delivered a lot better as well, because it's not, service desk is never built to manage those planned and proactive changes. They're always everyone's geared to, it's reactive. Something's broken, we need to fix it. And things like that always sit at the bottom of the priority list. I will get to that workstation when we can. And 3 weeks later, the client's ringing up saying, where's my workstation? And we're carrying the burden of we need to actually deliver it to invoice it and collect our cash. So that's often that sort of logical next step where I point people towards so that they can start getting not only more productive and better experience for the clients, but actually like generating a lot more money and being able to start that sort of specialization a lot better.
Yeah, I think every team has to decide what are those splits on what each team is doing. I don't know if it's not necessarily black and white that you have to split it this way. It just depends on the types of work and the volume. But we saw that even early this year. We did a firmer split between project and service, and it really helped both teams to be flowing better and better management. So each had its own clear team lead. So they were less overwhelmed. They were more in control. And yeah, solved a whole bunch of issues. So it just immediately impacted our top line and our bottom line. Like, because everyone was trying to do everything and then nothing was getting done. And because they're all just sitting in the backlog and they're trickle feeding these tickets to get a little bit of time, but not really getting moved forward. So now we're like, nope, you are not allowed to touch any single service ticket. Nothing. No, right? You are not allowed. Slap their hand if they touch a service ticket, unless your direct manager has actually given it to you. And that got those projects going and the clients are happier and making the money. So last question I want to ask you is the leadership of a project team. I think all these things probably apply in the structure of a service team too, but we're talking about project roles. Let's say you have a coordinator and you've got the senior engineer who's lead, and they got a project pod of 4 or 5 people. Who's the leader in terms of they're going to do one-on-one check-ins with each person, they're going to do quarterly reviews, they're going to do hiring and firing? Who would that be?
In that sort of team, it really depends who's there. But typically, I feel if you've got the right project coordinator, that's the sort of responsibilities as that team's grown. If they've come through with the team, they're probably the natural leader anyway of the people anyway. The technical person is very rarely going to be that people management component. Like, it happens, but very rarely do they want to sit down with people and do one-on-ones and manage performance and go through that kind of stuff. So if you've got the right project coordinator, which most of them are, once you've got one that's settled, that's that next level up. All right, you're really doing that coordination work well. You're working well with clients. The next logical step then is, well, now you can manage the people and be responsible for it, and then that elevates them up to it's the project team manager or professional services manager. Don't call it a project manager, because project manager is something very specific, but that's where we can elevate them. They can still do all the coordination work because they're based on volume, but then they become that leader. Because otherwise, even if that project and the lead project engineer, if they have to take on the people management responsibilities, a lot of the time that drags away from what they're actually really good at. And that could be a good thing if they're actually suited to starting to step up to lead the team properly, and then give opportunities for someone else to be that sort of lead project engineer. But very rarely is it suitable, from my experience.
Yeah, it depends on the person. That's what I've seen in multiple teams, is that it can be a vacuum, or you get the wrong person in that seat. And it's now you're not getting the leadership and you're not dealing with the interpersonal issues, the emotional things. And then you get stuck that way. And to have, let's say, whoever that team reports to, could be an operations manager or whatever it might be, they may not have the time or know what's going on either, because they could be overseeing other leaders, other teams. So it's, I guess, for anybody listening is watch. I think it's very important to have that done, taking care of our people. Are they in the right roles, and check in? Is there anything you need to bring up? Is there any tension? Are you feeling happy going home every day, every week? Are you feeling productive? Having those conversations, an open space, a safe space to do that. Questions about your career and where are you going? Where do you want to be in a year, 3 years? The coordinator they may be doing a great job in the coordination, the admin side of it, but not ready in their career. They don't have the training yet to do the real leadership. So that's something, and a project manager may not have it either. If they were like an official PM, they're great on the PM, but they're actually not a team leader either. So that can be a vacuum, because just nobody's given those skills coming out of university on how to actually lead. They might get management skills. They know numbers and P&Ls, and they get some accounting and some project management skills, but they're not getting the people leadership skills. And our business is people. It's not tech.
100% agree with that, and I think it's something you really need to start thinking about as soon as you get past that project lead and coordinator. As soon as you start adding other people under it, someone needs to be responsible, and whether that's for the moment, like a lot of the time, like you just said, the project coordinator might just not quite be ready for it but they might be in the future. Usually falls to that like head of services or operations manager or something initially to build that out and do that sort of oversight, and then slowly transition it out. I think at a certain point, there's always going to be that balance of that team that we've built from the lead engineer into that project coordinator. Does the project lead report directly to that coordinator and they have to do the one-on-ones, or does it just go, there's actually two leaders in that team and they get it above? And often that's what it needs to be, because there's different streams. So, but it's important to make that clear and accountable fairly early on, to save yourself some problems.
Yeah, there's jobs to be done, and sometimes it can be done by one person, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 people working together. That's where I've come to even just recently, right? Is building up middle management and more levels of management, and you promote people, and just you keep going through these. You're hitting your head against these different ceilings along the way because you're not ready to hire somebody who's been there, done that. So you got to grow your people, and it's just you keep hitting these. I guess inflection point is the word, right? But as you grow, we got to keep having those conversations. So okay, I think we've covered this roles discussion good. So but we still got more planned for another episode at least. So any other closing thoughts on roles? And
I think the thing that I'd wrap up in all of this is projects are, if you haven't got good structure in your business and clear accountabilities and responsibilities, actually projects is a very good place to start, because it's usually one of the smaller departments, no matter what we do. And it's one of the departments that need the most structure, because projects are structured delivery. So starting here and really defining those accountabilities and responsibilities, and finding the gaps to start with, and then just running the simple numbers of volume, because projects are very easy. If we're doing X amount of revenue, we should need X amount of people. It's the only variability is if we haven't scoped right or we're not selling enough, but that's not project's problem really. We've just got a delivery. We've got to deliver. So projects is a great place to start to create that clear accountability line, and build the maturity up in the rest of the business from there.
Yep. And I guess just to wrap that all up, there's resources available, like coaches like yourself. There's a lot of resources out there to help, training, awareness, tools, all sorts of things, conferences on that. So if you see this need in your company and then projects are suffering, then by all means get help. It's going to pay off with profit and growth and success of your team. And if you can just keep one resource, you don't have to replace them. That can save you $50,000 if you look at the cost to replace. And the replacement will cost you more in the hiring and all these things. Like keep your people and keep them happy and growing and thriving. And that means a bit of coaching for a few months or years, to equip them. If you promote them into that position and you see the potential, then unlock that and with the right training. So
it's a great final thought. Been a lot of fun, Win.
Good. Enjoyed it. Yeah, I enjoyed that as well. Learned a few things there on the PM versus the coordinator. So good. Thank you. And I'll see you next time, James.
Well, thank you again for having me. See everyone next time.
Yeah, and hope your puppy comes around and does what dad and mom are supposed to want the pup to do.
That's coaching, right? Just got to coach him for a while, and he'll come good.
Yeah, maybe herding puppies is maybe easier than herding cats.
I'd hope so.
Okay, I haven't tried it, so I'll stick to my chickens. So they stay in the coop mostly. All right, good. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Wim.